I grew up in a place most people in Philadelphia pretended didn't exist. The orphanage sat at the end of a cracked road, hidden behind rusted gates and peeling white paint that had long since turned gray. The building smelled of damp wood and mildew, like the rain had soaked into its bones decades ago and never left. The floors groaned under our steps, the windows rattled with every passing truck, and at night the wind carried the cries of children who dreamed of homes they'd never have. I was one of them. My earliest memories weren't of family, but of iron bunk beds and cold porridge. We were told not to ask about our parents, not to ask why we were here. The past doesn't matter, the caretakers would say. But to us kids, the past was everything. It was the only proof that once, someone had cared enough to bring us into this world. Among the whispers that floated in the dormitories after lights out, one story always returned. It wasn't about ghosts or monsters, it was about a girl. Her name was Clara Whitmore, the daughter of a man whose name carried weight all across the city. The Whitmores were untouchable: mansions, private cars, newspapers filled with their parties and business deals. But Clara had disappeared when she was still young, and no amount of money had brought her back. The other kids liked to whisper about her as if she were a myth. She ran away, some said. She was taken by strangers, others argued. I didn't join the debates. I didn't have to. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen her. It was years ago, on a night when thunder cracked so loudly it shook the glass, and rain pounded against the roof like fists. I was only a boy then, too restless to sleep. I crept to the back of the orphanage where the window had a broken latch. From there, I could see the narrow street that ran along the factory district. That's when I spotted a black car, sleek and shining even under the storm. Its headlights cut through the rain as it slowed near the alley. Through the blur of water, I caught sight of something that burned into my memory. A girl with golden hair, soaked and clinging to her face, was being led into the car. She was crying, her small fists struggling against the hands that pulled her forward. Her eyes met mine for only a second, wide with fear and pleading. And then the door slammed shut, and the car drove off into the night. Most kids would have forgotten, dismissed it as imagination, or chalked it up to the storm. But I couldn't. That face, those eyes, I never let them go. As the years passed and the whispers about Clara Whitmore grew, the pieces fit together in my mind. The girl I had seen wasn't just anyone. It was her. I didn't tell anyone at first. What good would it do? I was just another orphan, nameless and voiceless. When I finally gathered the courage to speak, the staff brushed me off. "You're making things up," one of them said. The other kids laughed, calling me the dreamer. But I wasn't dreaming. I remembered too clearly. Even the smallest details, the black car with tinted windows, the sound of her crying muffled by the storm, the direction the car had taken. It had turned toward the old textile factory by the river, a place abandoned for years. Every time I passed that broken window, my chest tightened. I could almost hear the echoes of that night, the splash of rain, the hum of the engine, the soft, desperate cry of a girl who vanished. I didn't know why fate had chosen me to see it, but I carried it like a secret carved into my bones. The others thought the orphanage was a dead end, a place you survived until you aged out. But for me, it became something else. That night had planted a seed, a weight I couldn't shake. I wasn't just an orphan. I was a witness. And someday, I knew, someone would have to listen. But until that day came, I held the truth close. And the truth was simple: Clara Whitmore hadn't disappeared into thin air. She was out there, and I was the only one who knew where she had gone. When I finally spoke out about what I had seen that stormy night, the reaction was exactly what I had feared. Nobody believed me. To them, I was just a boy from a forgotten orphanage, another kid spinning stories to get attention. The caretakers told me I had been dreaming. The older boys mocked me, calling me the liar or ghost seer. Even the younger kids, the ones who usually hung on every whisper of mystery, rolled their eyes. But I knew the difference between a dream and a memory. This was no dream. The car, the girl, the way her eyes had locked with mine, I remembered every detail like a scar that never faded. Still, the weight of doubt pressed on me. What if I was wrong? What if the storm had twisted my vision, the rain and lightning making me believe in something that wasn't real? I wrestled with those thoughts every night as I lay on the thin mattress, listening to the restless breathing of dozens of other kids around me. But each time, the memory came back stronger, clearer, as if to say, "Don't you dare forget." As I grew older, the whispers about Clara Whitmore never faded. Sometimes, I overheard the staff talking late at night, their voices hushed but not low enough. They said her father had spent millions searching for her, hiring private investigators, even going overseas following false leads. But every time, the trail went cold. To the world, Clara had simply vanished. And there I was, 15 years old, living among peeling walls and broken windows, carrying the one truth no one would listen to. The frustration ate at me. I would sit by the broken window, staring at the road where I'd last seen that car, wondering why no one cared enough to ask me for details. Why no detective came knocking at the orphanage door? Why the world trusted expensive suits and official reports, but not the voice of a boy with nothing? One day, I tried again. I cornered one of the caretakers, a woman named Ms. Green, who was known for her sharp tongue and sharper eyes. I saw her, I told her. I know where the car went that night. To the factory by the river. She sighed as if I were a burden too heavy to deal with. You've told this story before, and I've told you, stop making things up. People don't like liars, boy. You'll learn that the hard way. Then she turned her back on me. Her words stung, not just because of the dismissal, but because I could see she wasn't even curious. Not even a spark of what if. She didn't care. No one did. That was when the anger began to grow. Not wild, fiery anger, but a slow, heavy kind that settled into my bones. I wasn't just ignored, I was invisible. I decided if the adults wouldn't listen, maybe the other kids would. So one night, when the dormitory lights went out and the whispers began, I told them the whole story again, from the rain-soaked car to the girl's desperate eyes. I poured every detail into my voice. But when I finished, the room didn't go silent like I had hoped. Instead, laughter rippled through the beds. You saw a ghost, one boy shouted. She was probably a runaway, not some rich girl, another snorted. Next time, tell us she flew away on a dragon, someone else mocked. The laughter spread until it filled the room, and I lay back on my bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, feeling smaller than ever. And yet, even in that moment of humiliation, I knew something they didn't. I knew the road the car had taken, the turn toward the abandoned textile factory. I knew the way the headlights had cut through the storm as they disappeared into the darkness. I knew what I had seen. For years, the factory had loomed in my mind like a shadow I couldn't escape. I sometimes dared to walk near it, my shoes crunching on broken glass, my breath fogging in the cold air. The building's windows were shattered, its doors rusted shut, ivy climbing up its sides like claws. I would stand there, staring, wondering if she was still inside. Was she alive? Was she waiting for someone, anyone, to remember her? Doubt gnawed at me, but so did certainty. It was like carrying two voices inside me, fighting every day. One whispered, "You're wrong. You imagined it. Let it go." The other shouted, "You saw her. You know the truth. Don't stop." I didn't know which voice would win. All I knew was that my time in the orphanage was running out. Soon, I'd be too old to stay, pushed out into the world with nothing but a duffel bag and my memories. And if I didn't speak louder, if I didn't find a way to make someone listen before then, Clara's story, and mine, would stay buried forever. So I made myself a promise, I wouldn't stop. No matter who laughed, no matter who turned their back, I would hold on to the truth. And when the chance came, I would tell it to the only person who couldn't ignore me, her father. If you're hearing this now, it means the world didn't drown out my voice after all. It means you're listening, and maybe you believe that sometimes, the smallest voice can carry the biggest secret. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. By the time I turned 15, the secret I carried inside me was too heavy to keep hidden any longer. The whispers, the laughter, the doubt, they had all left me standing alone. But being alone didn't matter. What mattered was the truth. I couldn't shake the image of Clara Whitmore's face, wet with rain and tears, pressed against the window of that black car. I couldn't forget the direction it had taken, toward that lifeless factory by the river. Every night, lying in my bunk, I thought, what if she's still there? What if she's waiting for someone who will never come? The thought ate at me until one day, I decided I had nothing left to lose. If no one inside the orphanage believed me, if no policeman cared, then I would go to the only person who couldn't ignore me, her father. The Whitmore mansion wasn't just a house. It was a fortress. I had seen pictures of it in newspapers left behind on benches, sometimes glimpsed it from the bus windows when volunteers took us to the city. It sat on the edge of a vast lawn, guarded by wrought iron gates taller than anything I had ever stood in front of. To me, it might as well have been another world. But that day, my feet carried me across the cracked sidewalks and polished streets until I stood at its entrance, staring up at the towering gates that seemed designed to keep people like me out. My clothes didn't help. I wore the same faded jeans I had owned for 2 years and a hoodie with holes at the elbows. My shoes were thin and coming apart at the soles. The guards noticed immediately. 2 men in dark suits stood by the gate, their expressions hard and unreadable. One of them stepped forward as I approached, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here, kid?" he asked, his voice sharp. My heart pounded, but I forced the words out. "I know where Clara is." The silence that followed was suffocating. The guards exchanged glances, and then, almost at the same time, they burst into laughter. It wasn't the kind of laughter that made you smile, it was cruel, sharp, the kind meant to cut. "Go home," the taller one said, shaking his head. "We don't have time for fairy tales." But I didn't move. My fists clenched at my sides, my voice rising louder than I expected. "I saw her. The night she disappeared, I saw her being taken. I know where the car went." The second guard's expression darkened. "Get out of here before I call the cops. Last warning." For a moment, I thought it was over. My chance to be heard had collapsed in front of me. My throat tightened, and I turned, ready to walk away. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. High above, on a balcony framed by stone columns, a figure stood. He was taller than I imagined, his shoulders broad, his hair silver at the temples. Even from a distance, there was something commanding about him, something that made the guards straighten instantly. His hands gripped the railing, and his gaze locked on me. I didn't need to ask who he was, I knew. It was Mr. Whitmore. For a long moment, he didn't say a word. He just studied me, his eyes heavy with something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not suspicion. But desperation. It was the look of a man who had been searching for too long, who had run out of places to look, who had nothing left but hope and fear. "Bring him inside," he finally said, his voice low but carrying across the courtyard. The guards stiffened, their smugness draining instantly. One of them muttered under his breath, but neither dared to disobey. The gate creaked open, and for the first time in my life, I stepped into a world that had always been closed to me. The driveway stretched long and winding, lined with trimmed hedges and marble statues that gleamed in the sunlight. My sneakers sank into the gravel as I walked, the guards trailing close behind. My stomach twisted with nerves. What if he thought I was lying? What if he threw me out? Or worse, what if he was angry enough to make sure I never spoke again? When I reached the massive oak doors, they swung open to reveal an entry hall so vast it took my breath away. The ceiling soared high above, chandeliers glittered with hundreds of crystals, and polished marble floors reflected the light like a mirror. For a moment, I forgot why I was there. I had never stood in a place like this before. It didn't feel real. But then Mr. Whitmore appeared, descending the grand staircase with slow, deliberate steps. His presence filled the room. Up close, I could see the lines carved into his face, the weight of years of searching. He stopped just a few feet away, his sharp eyes fixed on me. "You said you know where my daughter is," he said, his voice steady, but I caught the tremor beneath it. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking. This was it, the moment I had waited for. The moment someone might finally listen. "Yes," I said. "I saw her the night she disappeared. I know where they took her." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. His eyes widened slightly, and he leaned closer, searching my face as if trying to read the truth in my eyes. For the first time since that stormy night, I felt the weight of my words shift. Someone wasn't laughing. Someone wasn't dismissing me. Someone was finally listening. The air inside the Whitmore mansion was heavy, almost suffocating, filled with the faint smell of polished wood, leather, and cigar smoke. My sneakers squeaked softly on the marble as I followed Mr. Whitmore down a long hallway lined with portraits. Every frame showed a different ancestor staring down at me with cold, painted eyes, as if silently judging the boy who had no business walking these halls. We entered a study at the end of the corridor, a room drenched in warm light from a tall lamp. The walls were covered in bookshelves stacked with leather-bound volumes, and in the center stood a massive desk carved from dark oak. A fire crackled quietly in the fireplace, even though the night wasn't cold. The room felt alive with secrets. Mr. Whitmore motioned for the guards to leave us. The heavy doors shut behind them with a sound that echoed in my chest. For the first time, I was alone with the most powerful man I had ever met. He leaned on the edge of his desk, his sharp eyes fixed on me, his fingers drumming lightly on the wood. "Tell me everything," he said. My voice trembled as I began. I told him about the storm, the broken window in the orphanage, the black car glistening under the rain, and the girl with golden hair being pulled inside. I described the way her eyes had met mine, wide with terror, the way her fists had fought against the men holding her. And finally, I told him where the car had gone, down the road, toward the abandoned textile factory by the river. As I spoke, his expression shifted. At first, suspicion flickered across his face, but then his features hardened into focus, as if each word I said was a thread tying itself into the puzzle he had been trying to solve for years. His hands, once steady, trembled ever so slightly as he poured himself a glass of water but didn't drink it. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like a rope pulled taut. My heart pounded. This was the moment he could dismiss me like everyone else had, call me a liar, and throw me back into the world that had never wanted me. Instead, he whispered, almost to himself, "You're saying my daughter is alive?" "Yes," I said quickly, before I lost my courage. "I don't know if she's still there, but I saw her. I know what I saw." He looked at me for a long time, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in the armor of the billionaire. His eyes glistened, though no tears fell. His jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling with the weight of emotions he had tried to bury. "You have no idea what you're saying," he muttered, though his voice carried no anger, only pain. "For years, I've chased every lead, every false promise. I've paid men more than you'll ever see in your life, and they've given me nothing. Nothing." He slammed his fist on the desk, making me jump. Then his voice softened, almost breaking. "And now, a boy from an orphanage walks into my home and tells me what no one else could." I swallowed hard, my voice small but steady. "Because I was there. I saw her. And I never forgot." The firelight flickered against his face, casting shadows that made him look older, heavier. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "Do you understand what happens if you're lying to me? If you're trying to play me, or if this is just some story you told yourself for too long?" His eyes bore into mine, sharp and unflinching. "Your life will not be the same. I can ruin you without lifting a finger." Fear surged through me, cold and paralyzing. But beneath it was something stronger, a determination I didn't even know I had until that moment. "I'm not lying," I said. "I'll take you there. I'll show you." His stare lingered on me, searching, testing, as if he could peel back the layers of my soul to see whether I was telling the truth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he exhaled slowly and nodded once. "All right," he said. "Show me." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Because in that instant, I realized what I had just done. I had bound myself to him, to his desperation, to the weight of a family's secret that had stretched for years. This was no longer a whisper in the dormitory or a memory in my mind. This was real. He walked back to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small box. Inside was a photograph, Clara, smiling, her golden hair glowing under the sunlight. He held it out to me. "Is this the girl you saw?" The second my eyes fell on the photo, my chest tightened. It was her. The same face I had seen that night, though younger, brighter, untouched by fear. My throat closed up, and I could only nod. Mr. Whitmore's hands shook as he took the photo back. "Then this changes everything." He leaned forward, his voice steady again, regaining its strength. "If you're telling the truth, if this leads me to her, then I owe you more than I can repay. But if you're lying," he let the words hang in the air, unfinished, but the threat was clear. "I'm not lying," I repeated, my voice firmer now. For the first time, a flicker of hope crossed his face. A fragile hope, like a flame sheltered against the wind. He straightened, nodded once, and pressed a button on his desk. The doors opened, and the guards stepped back inside. "Prepare the car," Mr. Whitmore ordered. His eyes never left mine. "Tonight, we're going to the factory." And just like that, the deal was made. A boy with nothing and a man with everything were bound together by the same desperate thread, the chance to find Clara Whitmore. The drive to the abandoned textile factory was quiet, except for the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. The The streets outside the city were dark, lined with empty warehouses and broken streetlights that flickered like ghosts. I sat in the back seat of Mr. Whitmore's sleek black car, gripping the edge of the seat so tightly my knuckles ached. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. Tonight, after all these years, Clara Whitmore might finally be found. As we approached the factory, my chest tightened. The building rose like a shadow against the night sky, its windows shattered, walls covered in ivy, and doors rusted shut with decades of neglect. The rain from earlier had left puddles that reflected the weak glow of the street lamps, creating a distorted image of the structure. Even now, I could see the broken roof and the jagged edges of windows that had long lost their glass. Mr. Whitmore didn't speak, but his presence filled the car. I could sense the tension in his hands, gripping the wheel, his jaw set tight. He had spent years searching, hiring the best detectives and investigators money could buy, yet he was here, relying on a boy from an orphanage for guidance. I swallowed, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. The car stopped a few yards from the main entrance. I stepped out first, my shoes crunching on gravel and broken glass. The air smelled of rust, damp earth, and decay. I held up a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the massive steel doors. "It's just through there," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. Whitmore followed, flanking me on the right, his tall figure casting long shadows on the ground. He didn't question my directions, only nodded, his eyes scanning every corner for threats. The guards stayed back, their faces tense, hands resting on the holsters at their sides. I pushed open the heavy steel door. It groaned loudly, a sound that echoed through the cavernous interior of the factory. Dust swirled in the beam of the flashlight, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Old machinery lay broken and rusted, conveyor belts sagging like tired arms, and shadows danced across the walls as we moved deeper inside. A chill ran down my spine. I had been here before, years ago, when no one else was around. Back then, it had been just a memory, a shadow in the storm. Now it was real, and every creak and drip of water felt amplified. I led them down the narrow corridor between two massive assembly rooms, my heart beating so fast I thought it might burst. Then I heard it. A soft cough, almost imperceptible, coming from the far end of the factory. My stomach dropped. My breath caught in my throat. "There," I whispered, pointing toward a steel door partially hidden behind a stack of crates. Mr. Whitmore froze, his eyes narrowing. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but laced with tension. I nodded, stepping closer. The cough came again, faint but unmistakable. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was small and dimly lit by a single, flickering bulb. And there she was. Clara Whitmore. Alive. Her hair matted and dirty, her clothes torn, but her eyes, were the same ones I had seen through that rain-soaked car window all those years ago. Wide with fear, yet flickering with recognition. Shackles hung loosely from her ankles, the marks of captivity evident, but she had survived. When she saw her father, her voice cracked, a whisper barely audible over the factory's silence. "Dad?" Mr. Whitmore stepped forward, his own voice catching in his throat. "Clara, it's me. It's really me." She collapsed into his arms, trembling, and for a moment, nothing else existed. The echoes of the factory, the shadows, the years of searching, they all faded into that single, heart-stopping moment of reunion. But the relief was short-lived. Outside, headlights cut through the broken windows, and shadows moved rapidly along the walls. Figures in black masks emerged, surrounding the building. My stomach sank. Whoever had kept her here hadn't planned on letting her go easily. Chaos erupted. Shouts, the clang of metal, footsteps racing across the factory floor. Mr. Whitmore shielded Clara with his body as I tried to block the approaching men. My pulse hammered in my ears. Fear and adrenaline coursed through me, but the memory of that first night, seeing her taken, gave me strength. I couldn't let them take her again. The next moments were a blur of movement and noise. Somehow, we managed to drag Clara toward the exit, dodging shadows and shouts. Her small frame was frail, but her grip on her father was unyielding. Step by step, we pushed through the chaos, toward freedom, toward the life that had been stolen from her. And as we finally emerged into the cold night air, the rain washing over us again, I realized that the nightmare of the factory was over, but the story of what had kept Clara hidden, and why, was only beginning. The night air hit us like a wave as we stumbled out of the factory, Clara clinging to her father's arm, her body trembling and soaked from the rain. My legs burned from running, but I couldn't stop. Every step forward was a fight against the panic building around us. The headlights of masked figures still flashed in the shattered windows behind us, shadows darting across the walls like predators that refused to release their prey. Once we reached the car, Mr. Whitmore opened the door for Clara. She slid inside, her small hands gripping as tightly, and I climbed in after them. The engine roared to life, tires crunching over broken glass as we sped away, leaving the factory's darkness behind. My chest heaved with relief, but the sense of danger didn't vanish. We weren't safe yet. Whoever had kept her hidden would not let her go without a fight. As we drove through deserted streets, Clara finally whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible, "Why did they do this to me?" Her eyes, wide and fearful, searched her father's face. I didn't understand. I thought I was forgotten. Mr. Whitmore's face tightened. The truth he had suspected but refused to name finally came to light. "Clara," he said softly, "it wasn't strangers. It was people we trusted." Clara's head turned sharply, disbelief etched across her features. "What do you mean?" "They wanted to control you," he said, his voice steady but heavy with anger. "They hid you to control the inheritance, to control everything their family built. They thought no one would ever find you." I listened silently, my mind racing. It made sense now, the factory, the secrecy, the sudden disappearance. It wasn't random. It was calculated, and the people behind it had waited for years, assuming no child could remember or follow the trail. Yet here we were, proving them wrong. The city lights blurred outside the car windows as Mr. Whitmore's car sped along the wet roads. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, but his focus never wavered. Clara's small fingers remained intertwined with his, trembling slightly but slowly relaxing with each passing minute of safety. Finally, we reached a safe house that Mr. Whitmore had arranged, far from the prying eyes of the city. He guided Clara inside, and she collapsed onto a couch, exhausted, her body shaking from months of fear, neglect, and trauma. I stayed close to the doorway, feeling like a ghost in a world I had never belonged to. Yet, in that moment, I realized how pivotal I had been. I had brought her back, and somehow, that gave me a place in the story I'd once only observed from the shadows. The truth began to unravel further as Mr. Whitmore explained. The people responsible were insiders, trusted advisors, financial managers, even some of his closest associates. They had orchestrated her disappearance, hiding her in a place no one would think to look, assuming a child would be too small, too powerless to ever lead her father to her. But they hadn't counted on me. A boy with nothing, standing in the ruins of a factory, remembering a single, fleeting moment. Clara listened quietly, her eyes wide and haunted, taking in the details she had never known. She had been manipulated, confined, and isolated, but never forgotten. And in a strange way, that realization seemed to empower her. Her small shoulders straightened slightly, and she whispered, I can't believe someone remembered me." Mr. Whitmore knelt beside her, holding her hands tightly. "I never stopped looking," he said, his voice trembling. "Not for a second. And you were never alone. Even when I couldn't see you, I was always searching." As the night deepened, the police arrived. Reports were filed, evidence collected, and the men responsible for keeping Clara hidden were taken into custody. The official world of paperwork and cameras moved slowly, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was free, and the nightmare that had consumed her life for so long was finally ending. And yet, in the quiet moments that followed, I could see the fear lingering in Clara's eyes, the fear of betrayal, the fear of trust, the fear that the world might still take everything away. But I also saw a spark, faint but undeniable, a flicker of strength that had survived all these years of darkness. Mr. Whitmore looked at me then, his eyes searching mine. "You brought her back," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "You did what I could not. You were more than I could have hoped for." I swallowed, feeling the weight of the past, the orphanage, the stormy night, and the secrets I had carried. For the first time, I realized the full impact of what had happened. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was part of this story, entwined with Clara's return, and with the reckoning of those who had hidden her away. And as Clara leaned against her father, exhausted but alive, I knew that the truth revealed that night was not just about secrets and lies. It was about resilience, hope, and the unrelenting power of memory, the memory of one small boy who refused to forget what he had seen. The morning after Clara's rescue was quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets and sidewalks glistening under the soft glow of the rising sun. The city seemed slower, holding its breath, as if it, too, was witnessing a miracle. Inside the safe house, Clara sat at a small wooden table, sipping tea with trembling hands. Her father watched her from across the room, his expression a mixture of relief, awe, and something deeper, an unspoken promise that the horrors of the past would no longer define her future. I stood near the doorway, hesitant to interrupt, but also unwilling to leave. After years of being overlooked, dismissed, and doubted, I had been thrust into a family's most private, most desperate moment. And somehow, that made me feel both invisible and indispensable at the same time. Clara's eyes met mine, and for the first time, she truly looked at me, not with fear, not with suspicion, but with a quiet recognition. You brought me back," she whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "I don't know how to thank you." I shook my head, unable to find the right words. All I could manage was a simple, "I just remembered." Her father, Mr. Whitmore, stepped forward, his presence filling the room like sunlight. "No," he said firmly, yet with warmth. "You did far more than remember. You saved her. And for that, you will always have a place in this family." The words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. Family. The concept had been foreign to me for so long: children's homes, orphanages, temporary beds, strangers looking down with pity or indifference. And now, in one small, perfect sentence, I felt a connection I had never known. Over the following days, we worked to restore some sense of normalcy for Clara. Doctors and counselors came, checking her physical health and emotional well-being. Each step forward was painstaking, but every small victory, a smile, a laugh, even a quiet moment of peace, felt monumental. And through it all, I remained by her side, a silent presence witnessing her rebirth into the world she had been robbed of. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden streaks through the tall windows, Clara and I sat in the garden, surrounded by carefully trimmed hedges and the faint scent of blooming flowers. She looked at me, eyes reflecting the sunlight, and asked the question I had long anticipated but feared: "Do you have anywhere to go?" I hesitated, the weight of the orphanage, of years spent without a home, pressing down on me. "No," I admitted. "I don't have a family. Not like you." She reached out and took my hand. "Then stay with us. Please." I blinked back a mix of disbelief and gratitude. To be invited into this world, to be welcomed into a family that had seemed untouchable, was more than I had ever dreamed. Yet it felt right. It felt like the story that had begun in a cold, gray orphanage had finally found its conclusion, a story of survival, courage, and the enduring power of human connection. Mr. Whitmore joined us then, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've been through a lot," he said gently. "But if you want, you can start here, with us. A new beginning, a new family. And I promise, we won't let anything take that away from you." Clara squeezed my hand, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen, truly valued. It wasn't just the relief of surviving, or the awe of witnessing a miracle, it was the quiet, unshakable truth that I belonged somewhere, that my life had meaning beyond the orphanage, beyond the streets, beyond the shadows of doubt. That night, as we sat together in the mansion, the fire casting soft shadows across the walls, I realized that the story wasn't just about Clara's return. It was about all of us, about the bonds we had forged, the trust we had built, and the unspoken understanding that family could be found in the most unexpected places. And as Clara finally drifted into sleep, her father's hand resting gently on her shoulder, I knew that the life ahead was uncertain, but it was ours to shape. I had started as a forgotten boy in a crumbling orphanage, and now, I was part of something bigger, something lasting, a family bound not by blood, but by courage, loyalty, and the unwavering truth that sometimes, the smallest voice can change everything. There's another story on your screen right now, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. And, if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. There's so much more I want to share with you.